I'm by the pool here. I have a pool and I'm sitting under this umbrella, so there's like some shade. So basically, in this philosophy of science type of master course, I am reading some work by some different philosophers, you know, and one of them that we have mainly focused on is Foucault, which has written about how power is sort of distributed in different institutions, you know. So for example, in hospitals and psychiatry and all these things, you know, and how things are sort of organized within a narrow, narrow type of spectrum, you know, of what is normal and what is not normal. So there was quite a few different philosophers who was mentioned in the course literature that we have, because the course literature itself is very like overview and general, you know. So it sort of is bringing forth some different, different philosophers and stuff. So we have Derrida, Popper, and Kuhn, and also we had this man who is called Martin Heidegger. So yesterday I actually was looking at some books that Foucault has written besides the Birth of the Clinic, which is a quite interesting book. It's quite heavy to read, but it's quite rewarding because it gives this overview of the historical, basically what Foucault does. Like there's even commentary books on Foucault's works, you know, but he definitely is like sort of explaining the history, and then he takes on the trying to explain how history is sort of having these problems, you know, with how things have sort of unfolded, you know. So for example, with the hospital, how things are sort of structured in a certain way, and for example the doctor-patient relation, how that is sort of organized in a hierarchical form of relation. And there's like certain problems with that, you know, because there is of course good in a sense that once you actually are able to sort of control large amount of people and stuff, you sort of is showcasing how well the knowledge is is working, you know. It works because you are able to control large amounts of people, you know, in a certain direction by the different institutions that are in the society. And that's what Foucault does, and he's like trying to give this historical background just to explain that where can we find alternatives, you know, is there any alternatives? Because one of the philosophical forms of foundations is that there shouldn't ever be any form of thought that is having monopoly, you know, on its own. There should always be alternatives, because where there's no alternatives, there's like there's not any room for further not just expansion, but like types of other ways, innovations and stuff, you know, to sort of take place. So it's very important to always search for alternatives and find, have a critical mindset, you know, also to the methods that are used within certain paradigms and stuff, you know. So Heidegger, he basically, this is like his best work that he has produced, and it is also said that this is the German best type of work, you know, ever produced. German hasn't really produced any major forms of philosophical works or backgrounds to science in that sense, but Heidegger has sort of been one of those who actually has brought something to the table. and he has basically sort of in this volume he has sort of reflect on the you know, based on a scientific you know, approach, he has sort of reflect on the being and time and its sort of implications to philosophy and science, you know. And so basically he was active during the 1900th century. He was born in the 1800th century in German, and he was let's see here, he taught philosophy at the University of Freiburg and the University of Marburg. As I said, this is his best sort of well-known work. So let's see what else. So basically he was also criticized as well, because most philosophers, they do find themselves being criticized, you know, for what they do. Because that's the way things should be. You have to be criticized, like, or not a person, but like the work itself has to be criticized. Otherwise it's you know, otherwise it is potentially holding the platform to become a form of monopoly. So, but he was also actually a supporter or like involved in this whole Nazi party, you know, in the German. So therefore his work has also been kind of regarded as, you know, sort of controversial, because you don't know how he associated his own work in relation to his political activity, you know. I think he was a political activist, actually. I'm not 100% sure, but let's see here. Yeah, he wasn't allowed to teach between 1945 until 1951 because of the, you know, his affiliation to the Nazi party. So yeah, but as I said, we have studied some of his sort of theories and stuff in there was a book. I maybe should know the author of that one, but it's actually Howell, 2013 or something, and it's called the Philosophy of the Methodology, I think, of Science. So, and he's like mentioned in that, and there's quite a lot of different you know, other philosophers and stuff who sort of has taken on his perspective or idea, or just form of, you know, developed it further. And I think, I'm not sure, because there's always someone who is a background figure, or like some background thoughts and stuff, you know, to where a philosopher is sort of taking on his own, you know, depending on what education and stuff he has been sort of dwelled in. I mean, he's going to build on from that, you know. But I haven't read this one. I'm gonna go over it and see what I find in this one. I just read the foreword, and it's a very interesting book, you know. Probably there is even Germans, you know, who finding this literature kind of hard to comprehend, and I don't know if it's because of their lack of philosophical knowledge, or if it's just due to the fact that he wrote in a such way that it's not so simple to comprehend. But there is going to be some German words and stuff in this one, so I'm not sure how that's gonna go, and I don't know who else he's going to refer to when it comes to other philosophers, you know. But I'm gonna try and go through this one and just get further sort of you know, understanding for his work and his thoughts. And because he has been quite influential, I don't know in which, because I was actually sort of contemplating over taking this book or a book by Derrida, and Derrida is actually still alive, and he has written deconstruction, you know. He has written and done philosophical work on deconstruction, and those thoughts has been quite influential in is it post-materialism or post-modernism? Either of those two, you know. But the deconstruction has been quite something that Derrida has sort of been doing. And he has some lectures, you know, you can find him on YouTube just for a brief overview where he sort of is talking and so forth. So yeah, so that is quite interesting book, you know. It's always interesting to read these key figures in behind science, you know, because all science is depending on philosophy, you know. There's like the connection to philosophy and science, you know. Especially when it comes to the methodology, like methods that you're using within certain paradigms and stuff. So the second book that I have also picked up is called Seven Pillars of Wisdom, Vintage Lawrence. So now this is actually sort of a reproduced book, and it is about Lawrence of Arabia, I think, yeah. So this is quite interesting because back in the days Oxford University was only available to those who were Christians. So you had to be a member of the Christian church or the Christian sort of, you know, just the state type of church, you know, to actually study at the Oxford University. Otherwise he wasn't allowed. So this Thomas Edward Lawrence, he was born in on 16th August in 1888 in Wales, and he attended, you know, like a university there in Oxford. And basically he took up some studies in the Middle East, and I don't know how much of Orientalism and stuff he might was studying, because I'm just mainly touching on this Orientalism, like the criticism to Orientalism. I haven't really dwelled into the background to it, you know, how it has sort of been shaped and so forth. But he studied about Arabic and stuff, and then he also was an archaeologist, and then he went to the Arabian Peninsula. However, I don't know how to say it. So during the World War I, he was working for the British Intelligence Service, and his activities, let's see, while fighting alongside the Arab forces. So basically he had quite an interesting life, and I don't know exactly what this book is going to sort of address, but it is of course about colonialism and stuff, you know, and quite important timing in the, you know, history of colonialism. The World War I was quite influential in that, you know, like the sort of turn of colonialism, you know. So, and of course this establishment of nations and stuff. So I don't know how this book is going to be built up, you know, because it says it has 7 pillars of wisdom, and I don't know what that is really referring to. But he has sort of written quite, I think he was writing about his own endeavors, his own adventures, you know, in Arabia, and during a very, you know, sort of interesting timing as well, you know, especially in relation to this, you know, colonialism and you know, just the world wars and stuff, and the whole sort of situation. But because of his background in archaeology and these things, he also has like a, you know, academic frame for what he actually is sort of doing, or his perception, I would say. So I don't know how he utilized. I'm like interested to see how this guy utilized his like academic perception and archaeological background in this, you know, in his sort of career, and what else he was doing, you know. And I think this is going to be a first-hand sort of person written paper, you know, or like a book. I'm not 100% sure, but it's I think it's a quite maybe an old form of text, I'm not sure. Like, I don't think there has been any changes done to it, you know. So I think this is like the actual text just reprinted in a newer edition. So yeah, so he was quite a controversial figure, and his talent as a vivid and imaginative writer shines through on every page. So yeah, I'm gonna have a read through this one because I'm quite interested in first of all, now I'm studying about colonialism, so I need to, or not colonialism, but like we are touching on colonialism as well, post-colonialism in relation to one of the courses that I'm taking. So I'm just interested to sort of, you know, I mean, I have read quite a lot of history, and I know all these sort of 1900th century form of history and stuff, but just to get someone's, you know, sort of almost biography on actually being part of in this whole complicated sort of web of colonialism, world war, political struggles and powers and all these things, you know. And because it has definitely shaped today's sort of situations across large geographic locations, you know. So yeah, and I think there's quite a few other types of authors that has written about Lawrence, you know. And there was like one other type of biography, but this one that I picked up, as I said, it is more about, the title is basically 7 Pillars of Wisdom. So I don't know how this one is different to the other books that was more about the biography about this man. Yeah, and I don't know if he also traveled to certain specific locations depending on his archaeological form of interest. Like if he was basically positioned in certain locations related to archaeological sites, or if he was like exploring in a different, like what kind of sort of what his incitament was, you know, when he was traveling and stuff, you know. So I'm gonna read this one. I figured this one is quite a good book to read, you know, and yeah, in relation to all the other stuff that I'm doing. So those are the books that I would also, if you're interested in philosophy, like westernized scientific philosophy, as I said, there is this Derrida, which is still alive, which is quite unusual for any philosopher, you know, because I feel like their works are always published after they have sort of been, you know, passed, you know. But then also Foucault is like if you are taking any courses in the university in the social science, psychology, medicine, health, history, a lot of these things, philosophy, law, excuse me, law or anything else, you're going to probably touch on Foucault when you get into maybe deeper into the education or the programs or whatever you're taking, you know, because all of these institutions have like a frame, and it's important to understand the background, episteme, and knowledge sets that is sort of underlying these things, you know, because it is very influential in what outcomes there is actually possible within these institutions, such as a hospital, you know, and what problems we are seeing with the hospitals today related to why they were established in the way they were, you know, and how it sort of is tying into, you know, locking up poor people into some form of institutions and stuff, you know. So definitely recommend The Birth of the Clinic, and there's always also one book he has written on punishment and I don't know, Power and Punishment, it might was called. He also wrote a book about power, and that one is also like a historical book, but with explaining the power distribution, not distribution, but how power has sort of been possible through the knowledge application, you know. So I'm gonna end here, and thank you.